welcome to this week's episode of the Tales of Agmar, where we are bringing back the glory days of sci-fi and fantasy storytelling. I'm your host, Sinjin, and I'm also the creator of the Tales of Agmar, and for today's cast, we're going to cover more of the glorious Ellonist Republic, with a focus on the different types of worlds that the Republic has, as well as the bureaucracy, or that government structure that kind of helps to run them. So we're not going to go over the whole government structure or all that other extra jazz stuff, just the ones that apply to the planet, since that'll be on the planetary and a sector level. And we'll talk a little bit more about the Chancelor himself. And then after that, we're going to go and take a short glimpse at Aster's backstory, who she is. As I mentioned last week, she is Gander's love interest throughout Tales of Agmar Gambit, as well as the additional books to come. And just like Gander, is a highly skilled Aces operator. We'll see how Aces operator goes. It works better than Aces unit because it's still like a person, but yeah. Anyways, aside from that, you may have noticed last week I did not spiel about the Patreon. I'm not going to do that again because I'm currently in a debate with myself about the Patreon. I was recently introduced to this other platform called Ko-fi. It's ko-fi, and I might do something through that just because they have like a tip jar thing, and I feel like that would be a lot more effective in terms of getting stuff for the cast, just because I don't want to always sit and bog people down with subscriptions. I forgot what subscriptions were called for a second. Sorry, my bad. And we'll see how that goes, but that's what I'm debating right now in terms of that. We won't worry about that. Update on the art, though. I have been in talks with a couple people about art and been working on some art ideas myself, and so hopefully in the next coming months we will see some art begin to pop up for the Tales of Agmar. But without further ado, let's go look at those Republic world types. So, the Ellonist Republic, with their many worlds, they've been organized into a couple types right now. These aren't quite fully all-encompassing, because there could be some very unique worlds out there, right? Just with the amount of different variations and such within a wide space, such as a galaxy. But anyways, let's start off with one that there's a lot of, and that is the urban worlds. So, urban worlds usually have a lot of people, right? Hence the urban part. They're going to have lots of buildings. These are very densely populated, so they're not like suburban worlds, right? These are urban worlds. So you got to think densely populated city center. There's going to be a lot of production here. There is going to be a lot of food shipped to these places, but it's never really enough to meet the demands of the population. And so you run into small resource wars between neighboring groups on a planet that usually ends up with a lot of gangs on these planets. There's also power shortages, and this is usually where like the baseline resident lives inside the Ellonist Republic. There is like a citizen tier system, and we will talk about that eventually, but we will not talk about that this time just because I don't want to bog you guys down with too much information. We'll keep this going, keep it flowing. But anyways, this also, urban worlds usually have a lot of groups rebel on them. And so whether it's planetary defense forces or larger Ellonist Republic forces that come in and clean that up, kind of depends on the scale of it. Though usually not an entire world will go into rebellion. If that does happen, then you will get a large response from the Ellonist Republic forces, and survivors from that, if they are loyal, will usually just end up getting recruited into expeditionary forces during the process of the invasion of the planet, and either used to liberate said planet or to go fight the next planet that is currently being pried away from the Ellonist Republic. But that finishes up urban worlds. The next one is garden worlds, and these we get the opposite of urban worlds. There's a lot more greenery here. Unlike the urban worlds, which don't have a lot of greenery, life's usually better. They get all the resources they need. They usually have excess resources, excess energy, excess water, clean water, right? Life is really good here, and that's because the higher ranked citizens live here. And that usually means that you either have a lot of money, some government ties, or you are like actually working for the government in some aspect. And so Gander comes from a garden world. That's Devos, which is Garden's homeworld. Yeah, Gander's homeworld, not Garden homeworld. Sorry. But anyways, these places, they don't always run the tests on the worlds themselves unless they're like simple tests. But you do get a lot of employees coming here that work in the sciences, hence why I was talking about tests. Sorry. Anyways, jumping to the next one, these are Agri worlds, right? So basically, it's a world that's a giant farm. We use every inch of the planet somehow to be farming and producing some sort of food. And a lot of this food is produced and then shipped off. There's a lower amount of people, and you get a lot more robots working it, right? Because you can automate a lot of tasks with robots. There's, of course, still certain types of fruits, vegetables, and other eateries. Eateries isn't the right word. Other sources of sustenance, there we go, that have to be picked by human hands. And so that's why there's still a population count on this planet. They're not completely run by robots. And then usually nearby, not on the planet, but nearby, there's a large military presence to protect these planets because they are very important to the Ellonist Republic as they are the breadbaskets. And, right, like these have to be scattered kind of all over the place in order to make logistics easier. Even though we have the gates, which give us that instantaneous travel, you still have to travel between gates, which can take some time and picking and harvesting and all that jazz. And so usually up in space, they will be storing lots of food in preparation to ship it out. It does not get stored planet side in order to save more space for the actual growing of crops. So next we're going to jump over to training worlds, right? So we've talked about where the lowest people live, the highest people live. We talked about where all your food comes from. This is where all of your troops and a good majority of military equipment is going to come from, is these training worlds. So usually, for instance, we talked about Ragash last time, right? There's a huge military presence there. They're training tons of troops. There's also usually some shipyard in orbit or nearby on another celestial being that produces ships from raw materials taken from other places. And then they've got tons of defenses, like I was saying. And one chunk of the world is usually turned into like housing and training. And the other chunk is more housing, but then also production, usually, depending on what's needed in the area. There are worlds where they are just entirely training because production there is impossible or not needed because it's fulfilled elsewhere, as we do have specific production worlds that just spend forever producing stuff, and which is the urban worlds, right? But in case you need some production nearby, that's usually done on training worlds too. And like more specialized items like scout units might be produced on training worlds just to prevent them from falling into enemy hands, which for the Ellonist Republic right now, the only enemy is themselves. Anyways, those test worlds, I accidentally started talking about them for a second on the garden worlds, but usually that's where you do a lot of military testing. So whether it's some asteroid that gets designated as like a test for some space weapons, or it's some random backwater colony that gets turned into a test for some bioweaponry. Yes, there's a lot of bioweaponry here, but that's usually done in the test worlds. And then since we just got done talking about what colonies could become, we'll kind of talk about the beginning of a colony for just a second here. Like most sci-fis, you've got to be expanding your populace everywhere. You got to get them places, so we've got colonies. They're going to use up a lot of supplies to get there. If they're doing a jump to a location that we already know exists, right, that's going to take them 7 weeks, and they're going to be in cryo the whole time. So they don't need that food on the trip to their new home, but they are going to need that food and those raw resources once they get there to begin harvesting. And then colonies usually get turned into big extraction worlds that extract a lot of materials as well. And then, of course, there are penal colonies, which is going to be where you get a lot of that extraction from. And they're basically just mining the entire planet until they can't anymore. And then they will transplant that colony to another place to mine. And that is going to cover up our world types. So next, we're going to jump into the Ellonist bureaucracy. And we're going to cover this up pretty quick. So first off, we've got a planetary governor, right? They're going to rule over a planet sometimes they get the position because they know a guy, and they are rarely, if ever, elected by the people, right? It's because you know a guy, or the Chancellor knows you, or you're deemed as being, really high and proud of the Ellonist Republic. Like, there's no way that you are going to betray them. If somehow a planetary governor were to betray them, right, they would be killed as soon as possible, usually in a big show of them dying. But they also, one of their administrative duties, aside from making sure that whatever their planet produces gets out there, is going to be worrying about ground forces. So usually they will train up some PDFs and maintain that, because those PDFs, those planetary defense forces, by the way, that's what PDF means, are also going to be their police forces for their individual planets. Next, we're going to jump up to sector governors. So they do the similar things as planetary governor, just over a sector. And that way the Chancellor doesn't have to come down and micromanage planets. That's what these guys do. They're going to worry a bit more about space defense if they're going to set up any defensive satellites. And then they'll mostly be working with the military through that. So sometimes you'll see a sector governor actually be some high-ranking military official, but then they also manage a sector on top of that. And so they get niceties, and they thought being a planetary governor was cushy. You get a nice house and everything. Sector governors are cushy. You usually have a nice house, nice ship, and it's a very nice ship, right? You get paid a lot. You get little stipends from the government to go around and everything, right? But only planetary governors or military officers who prove themselves get into this position inside the Republic. So this is one that usually a lot of people try to gun for if they want some cushy job in the future, right? And to be safe with lots of money behind you, which you can debate whether or not you're actually safe when it happens. But anyways, let's move on to the Chancellor now. So I've mentioned a little bit the myth, the legend, the eternal ruler himself, and we're just going to leave him unnamed. Not that he doesn't have a name, but just the fact that we need to build the fact that he's really just called the Chancellor. No one actually knows his name yet. Yes, I will reveal it in one of the books in the future, but y'all will have to hold on to your seats for that. And quick lore blurb about him. He could totally be corrupted by the demons, right? We talked about demons and dragons in the intro episode, if you remember that. And we're going to kind of leave it at that, because the Ellonist Republic doesn't even know that demons and dragons are a thing. They just know that the Ellonist Republic has been here a mighty long time. So anyways, next we're going to go and we're going to jump into that little blurb about. All right. So Aster, she comes from the home world of Bliss, which is an urban world. So as you can already kind of start to sleuth out from what we talked about just a couple minutes ago, she does have to deal with those gangs. There's also a lot of drug that happens and a lot of violence related to those two things on these urban worlds, and Aster got to experience all of that. She kind of goes into it in Tales of Agmar Gambit. I just finished fully fleshing out that section inside this big draft we're working on. And just quick update on that. By the time of you guys listening to this episode, we should be about 25% of the way through the book. So very exciting. We're getting this big chunk out there, and then soon I'll be able to go back and get it ready for some beta readers. So definitely stick around for that, and I will announce as soon as that happens. Random tidbit on that about the beta readers thing. I have decided that I am going to get a Discord up and running. Give me a few weeks on it. I got a lot of stuff on my plate right now, but I am going to flesh that out, build it out how I want it, and then I will be dropping the link for all of you to come join for free so you can interact around Tales of Agmar, ask me questions, as well as be updated more regularly on the book and when that beta reading is going to happen and how that's going to go down. But anyways, let's jump back to Aster. So like I said, growing up, she had a lot of problems. Her parents were addicted to a drug, which is called Focus. Good times. I'll show you all the spelling sometime. But basically what this drug does is it dumbs down the brain of the individual so that they can, focus, in parentheses, on a task and then do that task repeatedly. And people get very addicted to this drug, especially on urban worlds. It's may or may not be produced by the Republic themselves to increase productivity on these worlds, but people can work super long shifts while taking focus, and it doesn't cost that much for them to produce. Whoever's producing it, not to say a certain group is or isn't. But anyways, when she was young, Aster got introduced to this drug by her parents. They tried to get her to take it, to go get her to start working in the factories. And she's like really young at this time. And instead, Aster's body rejects it because she just has this like natural repulsion to the drug. Basically, it tastes terrible on her tongue versus everyone else. And so she naturally spat it out as a kid. And they planned to come around and do it again. This was actually around one of her birthdays. They planned to come around and do it again in a year, hoping that, it would go away, they could put their kid to work and make more money, right? Aster's parents never end up making it to that year because they die. They could have died from a drug overdose, or someone could have taken them out. We're going to leave it at that. But basically that leaves Aster parentless, and she now has to navigate the entire world of bliss by herself. And while she's doing that, she ends up picking up a unique set of skills in terms like hacking, with cybersecurity specifically, right? She was discovered to have an innate talent of this cyber hacking. I need to find like a better term, but because it's higher level hacking in Tales of Agmar for the Ellonist Republic than it's just like normal hacking nowadays, which is still a hassle, but not that you guys should go hack anybody. But anyways, that's not good. That's a crime, just so y'all know, in case y'all forgot. But she picks up on this skill and uses it to get resources, get into warehouses, right? Move logs around. Eventually gets so good to the point that she hacks her way off the world. Her and her friend Gina, and we'll talk more about Aster and Gina in Tales of Agmar Gambit. But anyways, that's how she ends up making her way to Ragash when she was 16, is through that hacking, and thankfully being good with a gun somehow. Which, unlike Gander, who had very professional training, Aster got very scrappy training from just different gangs, going different places, kind of getting passed around. If the gang she was with gets absolutely destroyed, she would usually survive, but that was because they all knew that she was this powerful hacker, which is why she tries to escape from bliss. But that pretty much is going to sum it up. So, not crazy super long today. Pretty easy. I don't want to give you guys tons of spillage on what's going on in the book, but I will tell you that it is going good. And like I mentioned at the beginning, we are going to take a different look at how to do some monetization for the book. Hopefully it ends up going good, going a lot better. I've just noticed that a lot of people don't really seem to be into subscribing, and that's just like in general. And I also want to give the option of a tip jar for you guys so you don't have to get stuck in reoccurring subscriptions. But if you want to comment about that, feel free to. If there was something in today's cast you really liked or something you want me to talk more about, again, feel free to comment. Like the cast wherever you found us, follow, and once again, thanks again for listening, and I will see you next week.